Hello there, and a very warm welcome to all of you on this Friday edition of the News Tonight here on Rajya Sabha TV, where we get you the day's top national and international stories in the next 30 minutes. I'm Tracy Shilchi, and here are the headlines. Congress and BJP trade fresh charges on the Lalit Modi controversy. BJP leaders back Vasundhara Raje against demands for her resignation. RBI Chief Raghuram Rajan warns of a 1930s like depression for the world economy, says global banks have to work in sync. Gujarat battles havoc left by floods. 70 people killed so far. Thousands cut off as heavy rains hit Saurashtra. Wave of Islamist terror sweeps Europe and Middle East. France, Tunisia and Kuwait targeted in Black Friday attacks. And in a historic ruling, the US Supreme Court legalizes same-sex marriages in all 50 states. Historic 5-4 decision rules marriage is a constitutional right for all. But first, more twists in the Lalit Modi controversy. The Congress was caught on the back foot today after the former IPL chief tweeted about a chance meeting with Priyanka and Robert Vadra. While Congress struggled to defend its first family, it also came out with new claims about wrongdoing on part of Rajasthan Chief Minister Vasundhara Raje. Here are the details.
Continuing its attack on the BJP over Lalit Modi controversy, the Congress reiterated its demand for Rajasthan Chief Minister Vasundhara Raje's resignation on Friday. Congress now alleges violation of government guidelines in an MOU signed between Rajasthan government and a cancer institute in Portugal, where Lalit Modi's wife underwent treatment.
ये एक नए तरीके के मदद करने का मॉडल निकाला है, जिसमें स्टेट के पूरे रिसोर्सेज को उनके डिस्पोजल पर रखकर मैनेजमेंट और पैसे से व्यवस्था करने का काम उनको दिया जाएगा। ये अपने आप में क्विड प्रो को जो हम कहते हैं कि आप मेरी मदद करो, मैं आपकी मदद करूंगा, इसका एक उदाहरण है।
The BJP hit back with a tweet by Lalit Modi that said he met Priyanka and Robert Vadra in London.
Today, when certain tweets are coming to the forefront, we come to learn that Lalit Modi had a meeting with the Gandhi family yesterday. We want to ask as to why the Gandhi family is in constant touch with Lalit Modi.
Congress leaders, however, mounted a strong defense in favor of members of the Gandhi family.
I'm saying with a sense of responsibility that neither Srimati Priyanka Gandhi nor Shri Robert Vadra have ever interacted socially with Lalit Modi. If you see an individual in a restaurant full of people, it is neither a crime nor is it morally wrong.
It has been almost 2 weeks since Congress has been demanding the resignation of Vasundhara Raje and External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj for helping Lalit Modi. However, the BJP has stood firmly behind its leaders so far. Vishal Dahiya, Rajya Sabha TV, Delhi.
But after the attacks on Vasundhara Raje and Sushma Swaraj, the Congress has opened another front against the BJP. This time, the party has complained to the Election Commission against Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Chauhan, accusing him of influencing voters in Garoth Assembly by-election.
The Congress claims the audio clip has Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan influencing voters in the Garoth Assembly by-election in Madhya Pradesh.
इस ऑडियो टेप में मुख्यमंत्री अपने कार्यकर्ता को सरकारी पद दिलाने का प्रलोभन दे रहा है और साथ में जाति के आधार पर वोट मांग रहा है। ये दोनों जो हैं, जो माननीय चुनाव आयोग की जो आचार संहिता है, ठीक उसके विपरीत है और दंडनीय अपराध है। हम चाहेंगे कि माननीय चुनाव आयोग इस पे कार्रवाई करें। उन्होंने
The party complained to the Election Commission seeking action against the Chief Minister, but the BJP mounted a strong defense of Shivraj Singh Chauhan.
ऑडियो क्या है, सीडी क्या है, ये तो जांच के बाद समझ में आएगा। जांच के बाद इसकी पता लगेगी। कूटनीति से बनाई हुई सीडी है, ये इसमें कहीं कोई दम नहीं है। इसकी प्रामाणिकता की पहले जांच करनी पड़ेगी।
Garoth Assembly by-election is taking place less than 2 years after Shivraj Singh Chauhan took charge as Chief Minister for the third time. The election is considered a litmus test for the ruling party. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan is indicating the return of a 1930s-like Great Depression for the global economy. Rajan has urged central banks across the world to define new rules of the game to avert the global crisis.
At a time when the government is expecting the Indian economy to make giant strides ahead, the RBI governor is sounding a dire warning for the world economy. Raghuram Rajan sees a return of the Great Depression era of the 1930s, when worldwide GDP fell by 15%. Rajan was speaking at a London Business School conference where he underscored the burden of growth that is creating an enormous pressure on central banks. He said, and I quote, "I do worry that we are slowly slipping into the kind of problems that we had in the 30s in attempts to activate growth. We need rules of the game in order to effect a better solution. I think it is time to start debating what should the global rules of the game be on what is allowed in terms of central bank action." Unquote. Rajan, however, said the situation is different in India, where the RBI still needs to bring down lending rates to boost investments. A comparative analysis of the world lending rates throws light on the anomaly. In the United States of America, lending rates stand at 0.25%, while in Great Britain and Australia, rates are between 0.50 and 2% respectively. Brazil, on the other hand, has kept its lending rates at 13.75%, while in India it is at 7.25% and in China at 5.10%. Economists feel the developed nations need to align their lending policies to forestall a global slowdown.
One hand we see the taper tantrum happening, on the other hand we see other bigger blocks like Japan and European Union coming with quantitative easing. So this kind of confusing policies among the developed countries are creating instability in the policy making of the emerging market economies like ours.
The RBI chief has been in past credited with predicting the global economic crisis of 2008. His forecast was not taken seriously then. But if a 1930s-like depression is indeed looming large, the global central banks do need to work in sync. Kriti Mishra's report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, even as RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan warned of a global economic slowdown in London, back home, the RBI warned that bad loans are set to rise. RBI asserted that public sector banks are the worst place, but private banks too are likely to see a significant jump in bad loans. Take a look.
Banks are sitting on a volcano of bad debts. The RBI has warned they are set to rise to 4.8% by September 2015 from 4.6% in March 2015. It also stressed that loans in the banking system now account for 11.1% of all lending in March 2015, up from 10.7% a year ago. Stressed loans are those that borrowers don't repay in time. Public sector banks recorded the highest level of stressed assets at 13.5% of total advances as of March 2015, compared with 4.6% in the case of private sector banks. The RBI has asked banks to make all-out efforts for bad loan recovery.
Continuously, we have been monitoring. We are sitting with them to we are working with them and guiding them to bring in appropriate additional capital. And the banks will have to tone up their recovery efforts. So it is a continuous process because it's not one-off exercise.
The BSE Sensex fell on Friday, led by declines in lenders such as ICICI Bank, after RBI hinted at quantum jump in NPAs of private banks. The RBI also said the probability of slippage of state electricity boards' exposure to bad loans is very high. Experts feel the Indian economy is on the path of economic recovery, but bad loans may play spoilsport.
We had already indicated that the NPAs towards the financial end of this year could reach to 5 lakh crore rupees, and it's a very serious concern. How do we revive the economy?
The RBI also pointed out that 5 subsectors such as mining, iron and steel, textiles, infrastructure and aviation had a much larger share of 51.1% in the total stressed advances. Among these 5 sectors, infrastructure and iron and steel had a significant contribution in total stressed advances, accounting for nearly 40% of the total. Kriti Mishra's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
On to weather. Woes now and heavy rains in the country have created a flood-like situation in several states including Gujarat, Uttarakhand and Jammu and Kashmir. While 34 people died in Gujarat since Tuesday, the Kedarnath Yatra in Uttarakhand has been halted for now. Here's a report.
The death toll in Gujarat due to the heavy rain has risen to 70. 34 people died in the Amreli district of Gujarat after non-stop rain since Tuesday. State Chief Minister Anandiben Patel took an aerial survey of Amreli and ordered to speed up the relief work. However, residents complain of not enough help by the state government.
बारिश की वजह से सारा गांव में सभी जगह पानी पानी है और आप हमारे दाहिनी साइड राइट साइड भी देख सकते हैं कि जो पानी है उसकी वजह से सारे रास्ते भी बंद हो गए हैं और प्रशासन की ओर से किसी तरह की कोई प्रकार की सहायता अभी तक आई नहीं है।
4 વાગે પાણી આવી ગયું છે, 4 ને 6 મિનિટે પાણી આવ્યું હતું અને પાણી આવતે ને 4 ને 8 મિનિટે પાણી અમારા માથા સુધી પૂગી ગયું। કોઈ પરિસ્થિતિ નથી કે અમારે શું કરવું, કોઈ ઢોર માટ બધું મરી ગયું છે, બધું ગયું છે, કેટલું બધું નુકસાન થયું છે। પોતાનો અમારો જીવ અમારે બચાવવા માટે અમારે કોઈ પરિસ્થિતિ નથી સર।
Meanwhile, the Kedarnath Yatra was halted on Friday after overnight rains lashed Rudraprayag district in Uttarakhand. The disaster response team rescued 15,000 pilgrims stuck on the Badrinath Hemkund Sahib road due to heavy rains. The Met Department warned of heavy rains and moderate landslides in the next 48 hours. Flood warning was also sounded in areas along the Bhagirathi river in Uttarkashi.
आज रूट जैसे थोड़ा क्लियर हो गया तो पैदल रूट से तो निकाल ही रहे। उसके अलावा उत्तराखंड शासन के द्वारा चॉपर की व्यवस्थाएं भी वहां कर ली है। जैसे जैसे विंडो मिलेगा उस हिसाब से चॉपर से उन लोगों को वापस जोशीमठ तक लाने की व्यवस्था की जा रही है।
However, the flood warning was eased in Kashmir after the water level in the Jhelum receded even as the river flows above the danger mark. India has recorded 24% more rainfall than normal this time, with central and southern India receiving 52% and 32% more rains respectively. However, northwest India, which includes Delhi and the NCR region, has received 5% less rainfall. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And now for more updates from across the country, here's Nationwide. The government has asked the CBI to investigate the organization of activist Teesta Setalvad, who has been accused of embezzling funds meant for the Gujarat riot victims. The Home Ministry has ordered the agency to freeze the accounts of Setalvad's company and to investigate the transfer of funds from US-based Ford Foundation to her company, Sabha. The Indian Railway Catering and Tourism Corporation will install 5 high-capacity servers imported from Singapore to speed up its e-ticketing operations. The entire procedure of e-ticketing will get a facelift with improvement in efficiency of the website, login time and payment gateway. Intending to replace the Soviet-origin main battle tanks, the Army has invited proposals from domestic and foreign firms for manufacturing future-ready combat vehicle tanks, significantly at a time when DRDO is already working on such a project. The Army has issued a request for information inviting responses from companies by the 31st of July to manufacture tanks which will replace the T-72 tanks. Security forces uncovered 2 militant hideouts in Doda and Riasi districts of Jammu and Kashmir. The operation was carried out jointly by troops of the Rashtriya Rifles and the Special Task Force. A huge cache of arms was recovered, which included several Chinese hand grenades and AK-47 rifles. Still ahead on the news tonight, we're getting international news, and the European Union leaders agree to speed up relocation of migrants entering Italy and Greece. Details of that ahead. Welcome back. You're watching the news tonight. Let's get you the big international story now. An Islamic State supporter celebrated a Black Friday with extremists staging a series of murderous attacks in Europe and the Middle East. While 27 people were killed in Tunisia, nearly 25 people were killed and over 200 injured in Kuwait. Here are the details.
Islamist terror visited 3 separate countries: Tunisia, France and Kuwait. At least 27 people were killed after one gunman attacked a Tunisian tourist hotel in the popular resort of Sousse. The body of one gunman lay at the scene of the Imperial Marhaba Hotel with Kalashnikov assault rifle. The nation has been on high alert since March when Islamist militant gunmen attacked the Bardo Museum in Tunis. In the southeast France city of Lyon, a decapitated head covered in Arabic writing was found at a US gas company on Friday. Police sources said 2 assailants rammed a car into the premises, exploding gas containers. The decapitated head had a flag bearing Islamist inscriptions. One suspect was arrested. In the third attack, a suicide bomber blew himself up at a packed Shiite Muslim mosque in Kuwait City during Friday prayers. The Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack in a statement posted on social media. It said it targeted a temple of the rejectionists, a term it usually uses to refer to Shiite Muslims whom it regards as heretics. It was the first suicide bombing attack on a Shiite mosque in a country where Sunnis and Shias live side by side with little apparent friction. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
For more on this, let's speak to Rizal Hassan Lashkar, who's the news coordinator with the Hindustan Times, joining us this evening from the capital. Rizal, for the moment, of course, France and Tunisia, no group taking responsibility as yet. Kuwait, of course, the ISIS has claimed responsibility. But, one can't ignore that this is coming just days after the ISIS urged its supporters to unleash what it called a month of disaster during this period of Ramzan.
Well, if you really look at the attacks, they do bear the hallmarks of the Islamic State, especially the attack in France. There are some reports suggesting that one of the companies that targeted has an Iranian owner who is most likely a Shia. So we have that angle again over there, just like in Kuwait. And even the attack in Tunisia, I mean, there are early indications that these could be militants linked to the Islamic State. So it is, it does seem to be a sort of a coordinated sort of an operation in these three countries. Although, as you said, we have a claim of responsibility only for the attack in Kuwait, which targeted Shias.
Rizal, just give us a sense really of what this means. 3 attacks, 3 different continents. Of course, no concrete information on really the 2 attacks in France and Tunisia. But, the American president himself, just a couple of weeks back, said that, they're not going as strong on the ISIS as the ISIS is, in fact, going on their agenda. What does this mean for the global community, world leaders as such? Should they be looking at this ISIS threat a little more closely?
Well, the ISIS is definitely a huge problem right now. I mean, the biggest problem is that a lot of people from countries have been going. These are basically migrants who have come to European countries. A lot of them have been going and joining up to fight in Syria and in Iraq. And then some of them are making their way back. I mean, so there is a huge concern in the West. And I think the world community needs to get its act together and maybe work more closely on countering this threat. More importantly, for India, there are indications that ISIS has been making its way to the neighborhood. There are indications that it's tried to establish a foothold in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. So this is something that, that India also has to prepare for. Because this is something that is now growing in our own neighborhood.
Closer home. Yes, in fact, I was going to come to that as my third question. How much closer is this threat to home, to India, or for that matter, our neighboring countries?
Well, it is a threat to India because, there were these 4 youngsters from near Mumbai who went off to fight with IS. Apparently, one of them has been killed. One of them came back, was captured. There are reports of from other parts of India trying to go to Iraq and Syria through various countries. Some of them have been caught, pushed back from countries like Turkey. But, these could just be the tip of the iceberg. There could be more people who may be going. And in fact, attacks like the ones that happened today can be powerful recruitment tools for IS. They can use them as propaganda to lure more impressionable youngsters to join their ranks. So this is definitely something that India has to watch out for.
As well. All right, Rizal Hassan Lashkar, thanks so much for joining us with those details there, what we're calling a Black Friday, really. And, the assault of the ISIS continuing in Syria as well. Islamic State fighters killed at least 145 civilians in an attack on the town of Kobani. It was described as the second worst massacre carried out by the hardline group. In fact, fighting between the Kurdish militia and the Islamic State fighters who infiltrated the town or at the Turkish border continued into the second day. A separate Islamic State assault on government-held areas of the northeastern city of Hasaka was reported to have forced 60,000 people to flee their homes. All right, with that, of course, let's head on to some more international news. And the other big story, in fact, coming in from the US, with the historic ruling, the Supreme Court there has legalized same-sex marriages in all 50 states. The historic 5-4 decision ruled that marriage was a constitutional right for all. Speaking after the ruling, President Barack Obama called it a victory for America and that the union is close to being perfect. It is, of course, unclear how soon marriage licenses will be issued in states where gay unions were previously prohibited. But for now, gay and LGBT activists, not just in USA, but also across the world, are hailing it as the biggest step forward for the community. Before the ruling, gay couples in the US could marry in 37 states in addition to Washington, D.C.
Folks who were willing to endure bullying and taunts and stayed strong and came to believe in themselves and who they were. And slowly made an entire country realize that love is love. What an extraordinary achievement.
All right, now let's get you the latest on the MERS outbreak in South Korea. The government there has decided to take up stricter measures to deal with the crisis after the death toll touched 31. South Korea introduced a new law designed to curb the outbreak, tightening quarantine restrictions and imposing jail sentences to those who defy anti-infection measures. Under the new law passed late on Thursday, false testimony of how the people contracted the virus would entail to a fine or a prison sentence. The new law also strengthens officials' power to restrict the movement of infected people and close contaminated facilities. The number of state health workers in charge of preventing outbreaks and tracing them will also be doubled. South Korean government is facing criticism for failing to stop the MERS outbreak, with 181 people diagnosed with the deadly virus so far. Meanwhile, the two-day EU summit in Brussels saw leaders agreeing to speed up relocation of migrants entering Italy and Greece. The European Council President called for action rather than empty declarations on solidarity. About 40,000 migrants will be relocated to several countries in the EU, but no mandatory quotas have been reached.
There's fresh hope for tens of thousands of migrants arriving in Italy and Greece. European Union leaders argued well into the early hours of Friday over how to tackle the migrant crisis in the Mediterranean. EU leaders agreed to relocate 40,000 migrants and share out the care of people fleeing war and poverty in North Africa and the Middle East.
Nous nous sommes mis d'accord, grâce à la maîtrise de Donald, sur le fait que l'Union européenne devra faire en sorte que 40 000 personnes soient relocalisées et que 20 000 personnes soient réinstallées. Que nous le fassions par une voie obligatoire ou volontaire m'importe très peu.
They will be relocated to other EU states over the next 2 years. The EU leaders reached the agreement based on a voluntary scheme, even though the EU executive pushed for binding quotas. The UK has opted out of the scheme, and nations in Eastern Europe have refused to accept set quotas. Hungary, which has seen thousands of migrants cross its border, and Bulgaria, one of the EU's poorest countries, have both been granted exemptions. The mood was a long way from the unity showed by EU ministers in April. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi too rebuked his fellow leaders for their reluctance to support the plan.
Et que nous mettions des heures à nous mettre d'accord sur le système appliqué prouve à l'évidence que l'Europe n'est pas à la hauteur des ambitions qu'elle déclame à chaque occasion lorsqu'elle s'esprime.
Come sapete è un accordo che noi abbiamo definito fin dal primo giorno un accordo che poteva essere molto più ambizioso, parliamo di 40.000 persone e tuttavia è un primo passo per dire che c'è finalmente una politica europea e non soltanto una politica dei singoli Stati.
Dieser Aufgabe gewachsen ist, und das hat durchaus die Möglichkeit, dass wir das sehr gut lösen und dass wir dabei wirklich stärker aus der Sache hervorgehen, aber das wird noch sehr intensive Diskussionen erfordern.
While the political deal was a breakthrough, implementing the plan still faces hurdles. The criteria to share migrants among member states must be decided by the end of July. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
With that, let's also take you through some quick global news updates. French President François Hollande condemned violent protests against taxi booking service Uber, but he said the service should be taken off roads. Highways were blocked and vehicles were set on fire by around 3,000 cabbies who took part in the protest against Uber on Thursday. Emotions ran high as mourners held the first funeral service for 9 African Americans shot dead by an alleged white supremacist in a Charleston church. President Barack Obama is scheduled to deliver a eulogy for another victim, the chief pastor. Obama will also meet the families of some other victims. In a report sourced mainly from US media, China on Friday slammed the US for a terrible human rights record. China said the US was quote-unquote haunted by spreading guns, frequent occurrence of violent crimes and police brutality. The document is released each year by China the day after the US State Department issues its annual Global Human Rights Report. A Pakistani suspected of taking part in the 2009 Peshawar blast, in which 134 people died, including many women and children, has been arrested in Rome. The man, who has been living in Italy, was held after stepping off a flight from Pakistan. And let's change tracks and get you the latest from the world of sports now. India's legendary batsman Sachin Tendulkar was voted the best test player of the 21st century in an online poll conducted by Cricket Australia's website. Sri Lanka's Kumar Sangakkara received the second highest votes, followed by Adam Gilchrist of Australia in third position. Satnam Singh on Friday became the first Indian to be drafted in the NBA League. He is only the second Indian origin basketball player after Sim Bhullar to feature in the NBA. Satnam Singh will be playing for Dallas Mavericks next season. Flamengo striker Paulo Guerrero scored a hat-trick as Peru cruised into the semi-finals of the Copa America. Peru beat Bolivia 3-1 to set a date with host Chile in the semis on Tuesday. He got his first goal from a header in the 20th minute, adding a second just 3 minutes later. His goal in the 74th minute completed his treble. And that's all we have for you on the news tonight. From the entire team here, good night and have a great weekend.